My friends, Napoleon is not done yet. We've done 3 videos on Napoleon. 2 of them are oversimplified and 1 of them is Epic History TV, and you guys love it so much. And so do I. So we have a second part of Epic History TV's Napoleon Wars documentary. It is going to be a long video, so you better go and grab your Estonian Youtuber cups and drink some delicious coffee. We have patrons before we go, and I don't want to say the first name because it's Drew. I'm not gonna say the family name because this word in Estonian means dick in its grossest form. It's a very bad word in Estonian. So yeah, Drew, I think you're pranking me here, but thank you for becoming a Patreon. We have Christina Beadle. It's really Christina, it's a woman. We don't have women in this channel. Most of my viewers are men, like 90% of them. I don't know what's going on, am I that ugly? First and last woman, probably. Thank you for supporting the channel. Angel Andres. Angel Andres. Angel is a man and a woman's name. And when I lived in Hollywood, I knew an angel. I knew a guy from Mexico called Angel. And Andres is the name of my uncle. Many connections there. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you want to become a patron, the link is in the description below. It's the fastest and the best way to support the channel. If Napoleon were alive today, he would wear one of these Finnish-made ROHJE watches. They're Finnish, handmade quality with reindeer leather straps. Reindeer leather is perfect if you're having a war against 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th or 5th coalition, like Napoleon did. If he would be wearing these watches, he would even endure the Russian winter. So if you wanna endure the Russian winter, go and get yourself a Finnish ROHJE watch. Link in the description below. Alright, my friends, let's dive into the Napoleonic Wars.
The Prussians abandoned Königsberg the next day, which was occupied by Soult's 4th Corps, while Bennigsen's shattered army retreated across the river Niemen into Russia. Tsar Alexander's advisors implored him to make peace with Napoleon. He accepted their advice, and a ceasefire was agreed. Alexander and Napoleon.
They're French kissing! If you're a Russian Tsar and you kiss a French man, that's obviously French kissing. It is weird. I don't understand it. I understand it might be a custom at this time, but they're holding hands and then French kissing in front of everybody. I don't get this.
Met for the first time aboard a raft in the middle of the river Niemen, near Tilsit, and developed an immediate rapport.
Kissing!
Tilsit proved to be one of history's great diplomatic summits, as the two emperors feted each other for days, with banquets, parades and concerts, then discussed affairs late into the night. A friendship of sorts developed, while Russia's former ally, King Frederick William of Prussia, was left out in the cold. And it was Prussia who would lose most in the Treaties of Tilsit, signed 2 weeks later. 1/3 of Prussian territory was taken away to create the new Kingdom of Westphalia, to be ruled by Napoleon's 22-year-old brother Jerome, and the Duchy of Warsaw, to be ruled by the King of Saxony, which Polish patriots hoped would prove a stepping stone on the road to their own state.
Yeah, I mean, Duchy of Warsaw, it has a Warsaw name in it. I think it's like a country before Poland. It's almost Poland.
Polish troops were recruited into the Grande Armée, with Polish lancers even forming part of Napoleon's elite Imperial Guard.
Whoa!
Russia only had to give up the Ionian Islands, as Alexander accepted an alliance with Napoleon that left the French Emperor master of Europe. Alexander even agreed to join the Continental System, Napoleon's economic blockade of Great Britain, which banned British ships and goods from all French-controlled ports. The system had been established the previous winter by Napoleon's Berlin Decree. Napoleon hoped that by cutting off British trade with Europe, he'd cause financial chaos and political upheaval in Britain.
Well, the same thing was done by the Third Reich with their submarine wolf packs in the Pacific, Atlantic I mean, where they shot down American, Canadian, Australian convoys, and I have done that in Hearts of Iron 4. I love to raid those convoys, taking away supplies from Britain, but it doesn't surrender British people. They're very stubborn. They're stubborn people. You cannot surrender them by taking away their supplies. If you take away their tea, they will get angry.
Allowing him to make a favourable peace. There was just one problem. The Continental System didn't work.
Yeah.
Not
shiver my timbers! Shiver me timbers! I love that. What is that?
Not only was it impossible to enforce and undermined by widespread smuggling, the system damaged French trade just as much as British trade. The decisive weapon in this economic war would prove to be the British Royal Navy, which that summer ensured its continued naval dominance by launching a preemptive strike against the neutral Danish fleet at Copenhagen, capturing their warships before they could fall into Napoleon's hands. Royal Navy squadrons blockaded all major French ports, seizing any ships trading with France, while ensuring British merchants could continue to trade overseas in relative safety. The Navy even seized the tiny Danish island of Heligoland as a base for smuggling British goods into Europe. But most disastrously for Napoleon, the Continental System would draw him into two conflicts that proved ruinous for his empire. The first would be fought in the Iberian Peninsula, where Napoleon decided to force Britain's ally, Portugal, to join the Continental System. In November 1807, French troops, supported by their Spanish ally, invaded the country. The Portuguese royal family fled to their colony of Brazil as the French occupied Lisbon without a fight. It looked as though Napoleon had won yet another easy victory. But the Peninsular War was just beginning.
Oh. Hey, let's have a little discussion. If you're Napoleon or if you're the Third Reich and you cannot defeat the British, how are you going to defeat them? Of course, in Hearts of Iron 4 as Germany, it's very easy to defeat them. Not a problem at all, at least. I've played many times now as Germany always defeated the British, no problem. The Soviet Union is the major problem there, and later the USA. But also I have had success defeating them. But how do you, in real life, what do you do as Napoleon here? You cannot make navy, that would take a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and resources to build up a navy, and the British are blockading you at anywhere, everywhere. You cannot build up a navy. And a land invasion is impossible because you cannot cross the channel. Is there something you can... There's nothing you can do. Please, write me an answer in the comments. I want to know.
In the autumn of 1807, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte dominated Europe. He had humbled Austria and Prussia and sealed an alliance with Russia. Of the major powers, only Britain still defied him, safe from invasion thanks to its powerful navy. Napoleon had ordered all territory controlled by France or its allies to stop trading with Britain, the so-called Continental System, or blockade, designed to wreck Britain's economy and force its government to make peace.
Yeah, Britain had huge colonies back then, huge colonies, and almost like 4th or 5th of the world was British dominated. They could bring over supplies from everywhere. This blockade is doing nothing for Britain, I think. They have so much land mass, they can bring in supplies.
But neutral Portugal had continued to trade with its historic ally Britain. So Napoleon sent an army under General Junot to occupy the country and force it into line. The invasion was supported by France's ally, Spain, though privately Napoleon held Spain's rulers in contempt. The Bourbon royal family was decadent and corrupt. The king and crown prince loathed each other, while the country was effectively run by Chief Minister Manuel Godoy, the Queen's lover.
What?
Spain, Napoleon concluded, was backwards, militarily weak and incompetently governed, and he devised a plan to seize control of the country. In the spring of 1808, under the pretext of guarding Spain against the British, French troops took up strategic positions around the country. The Spanish people saw the French military presence as the latest in a long line of humiliations, and held Chief Minister Manuel Godoy responsible. There were riots at the palace of Aranjuez. Godoy was nearly lynched. Napoleon invited the Spanish royal family and Godoy to take refuge in the French city of Bayonne, and sent Marshal Murat and 50,000 troops to restore order in Madrid. But on the 2nd of May 1808, the people of Madrid rose up against Murat's soldiers. It became known as the 2 de Mayo Uprising, immortalized by the artist Francisco Goya. This scene shows Mamelukes of Napoleon's Imperial Guard attacked by the citizens of Madrid. 100 soldiers were killed. The French responded ruthlessly, shooting down dozens in the streets and executing more than 100 by firing squad. Meanwhile,
what a horrible way. If you want loyalty from a country and if you want acceptance from its people, you cannot execute them. Every revolution only brings blood and violence. We have French Revolution, we have Russian Revolution, we have American Revolution. That's a dangerous path to take here. Bloody revolutions bring violence and blood. Peaceful revolutions bring peace and prosperity.
in Bayonne, Napoleon forced King Carlos to abdicate and bestowed the title King of Spain on his own brother, Joseph.
What?
That summer, as Napoleon forced a new modernizing constitution on Spain, and his brother Joseph entered Madrid as its new king, the Spanish reacted with fury. The French weren't just arrogant foreigners trampling on their national honor. They were godless atheists who, during the French Revolution, had rejected the Pope and Catholic...
Right, the Spaniards are Catholic and they're very strong believed Catholics. Napoleon is a little bit stupid to think that he can just go into that country and take power. You're gonna have a lengthy, frozen conflict in the form of Spain, which is horrible for you. It takes manpower and garrisons and casualties and everything. It's a horrible way to do this, to take it with force like that. You gotta be clever, you gotta do it through Catholicism. You know, you gotta have the Pope say that you are the king, then they will accept it maybe.
Church. Napoleon, priests warned the peasants, was the very Antichrist himself. Revolts erupted across the country. The Spanish army was joined by militias and partisans who attacked French troops and killed collaborators. French soldiers carried out savage reprisals. No mercy was shown.
This doesn't...
Countless atrocities horrified Francisco Goya and led to his famous Disasters of War series.
What do you achieve with these murders and these killings? People only get more angry and more revengeful and more... They want their revenge. Their family members have been butchered, they want revenge. This doesn't work. Didn't work with Stalin in the long term, doesn't work with the Nazis, didn't work with Napoleon. people will remember and they will rise up. If not now, then 2 generations away from now. They will have their own singing revolution.
At first, it seemed the French would easily put down the revolt.
No.
Girona, Valencia and Zaragoza were besieged by French troops, while the Spanish army of Galicia was routed by Marshal Bessières at the Battle of Medina del Rio Seco. But 8 days later, as General Dupont and 3 French divisions withdrew from Córdoba, slowed down by wagons piled high with loot, they were surrounded at Bailén by General Castaños' army of Andalusia and forced to surrender.
What?
The Spanish took 18,000 French prisoners.
French forced to surrender in Spain? That's what I'm talking about. This is the first most horrible defeat in Napoleonic wars. And it happened when they started to kill the people, kill the peasants, it doesn't work. If you want to take over a country, occupy a country, you need soft power. Soft power and cleverness. Brute force works for a little while, then it fails. Hey, just a soldier, I don't know nothing, but this is how I feel like I would react to if somebody comes and butchers my family or something. I would not forget, and I would not forgive.
About half of whom later died of starvation. Bailén was a humiliation for France, her first major defeat since Napoleon became emperor. France's enemies across Europe were delighted. Napoleon was incandescent with fury. The situation went from bad to worse. The Portuguese joined the revolt, while fierce Spanish resistance forced the French to abandon the sieges of Valencia, Girona and Zaragoza. Spain's new king, Joseph Bonaparte, was even forced to flee the capital. The British assisted the revolt, which the Spanish now called a War of Independence, by shipping weapons to Spain using the Royal Navy. On the 1st of August, a small British army commanded by Sir Arthur Wellesley landed in Portugal to aid...
Oh, the British have landed! It's the D-Day of the Napoleonic Wars! Woo!
...their revolt. On the 17th of August, he beat a small French force at Rolissa. Then, 4 days later, beat Junot's main army at the Battle of Vimeiro. But Wellesley's newly arrived superior, Sir Hugh Dalrymple, then agreed to repatriate Junot and his army to France, with all their arms and plunder, using British ships.
Why? What?
In Britain, the generous terms were seen as a disgrace and scandal. A subsequent inquiry exonerated Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, but Dalrymple never held command again. Napoleon decided the only way to sort out the situation in Spain was to go there himself. He assembled 130,000 reinforcements, including many of his best troops, and on the 7th of November led a second invasion of Spain.
How many do you need?
Most Spanish troops were inexperienced, were often badly equipped and led, and their armies had no coherent strategy. They were no match for the Grande Armée, which burst across the Ebro River and inflicted heavy defeats on the Spanish at Burgos and Tudela. At Tudela, Marshal Lannes' Third Corps avenged the defeat at Bailén by smashing the army of General Castaños, sending it fleeing in 2 directions. Napoleon pushed on rapidly.
Yeah, you win these battles, right? Because Napoleon is a genius, he wins all of these battles, but what do you do after? War, I don't think it's about winning these decisive battles all the time. It's about maintaining the garrisons, maintaining the land, and actually winning over the people. Because if you don't, they will rise up, and it doesn't matter how many men do you have, they can grind you down using guerrilla tactics. It's not all about winning these huge fights. More about how to contain the population and make them happy, actually. If they're happy, they will actually want to fight for you and be with you.
Napoleon, impatient to break through to the capital, ordered forward the Polish light horse of the guard. In
The Winged
attack of almost
Hussars!
suicidal bravery, they charged the Spanish guns head-on and enabled the French to take the pass. 4 days later, after Napoleon threatened to obliterate the city, Madrid opened its gates to his army. Unaware of the disaster engulfing Spanish forces, a 20,000-strong British army, commanded by Sir John Moore, had just arrived in Salamanca after a 300-mile march from Lisbon, with another smaller force en route from Corunna. The British army was inexperienced, but in contrast to most Spanish forces, it was well trained, organized, and led. As news reached Moore of the Spanish collapse, he nevertheless planned to divert French forces by attacking Marshal Soult's isolated Second Corps and threatening Napoleon's communications to Burgos and France. At Sagun on the 21st of December, the British 15th Hussars advanced overnight through winter frost and made a dawn attack on a French cavalry brigade, routing it in one great charge.
Whoa!
But as Moore prepared a full-scale attack on Soult's corps, he received news that Napoleon was advancing rapidly towards him with his main army from Madrid.
I mean, the English, right, they're masters of the sea, but as much as I know, they're not bad on land. They're actually pretty good on land, one of the best. But the French were just so much better, and Napoleon was crazy genius. But I think the British could have defeated most armies on land, except for Napoleon. I think they could have defeated Spanish army, Austrian army. British themselves have a huge land army, otherwise they couldn't maintain their garrisons in their colonies. I don't know much about it. How the British were a match for the French on land, right? But the French weren't a match for the British on the seas. So I think the British are actually in a better situation a little bit.
While two French corps under Marshal Lannes began a second bloody siege of Zaragoza, Napoleon saw a chance to get to grips with the British at last. Intending to trap Moore between his own forces and Soult's Second Corps, he force-marched his troops over the icy Guadarrama Pass.
It's all about force marching.
Moore, facing odds of more than 2 to 1, immediately ordered a retreat, planning to march 250 miles to the coast, where his army could be evacuated by the Royal Navy.
See, that's Dunkirk happening all over again. That's Dunkirk!
For both sides, the race to the sea was an exhausting slog through mountains, mud, and bitter cold. Many fell by the wayside as British discipline collapsed, leading to looting and drunkenness, except among the rearguard, which fought several skillful delaying actions and kept the French at bay. Soldiers of Britain's elite 95th Rifles were prominent in these skirmishes. This specialized light infantry regiment wore green uniforms for better concealment and were one of the few units on any side armed with rifles.
Green uniforms. At the time, concealment wasn't a thing. In the Second World War, Germans were the first one to actually wear camouflage uniforms, like these different colored green uniforms. So it took a lot of time to conceal yourself with your uniform. This is a very revolutionary idea to actually wear a concealing uniform, because the French and the rest of the British actually wore red, didn't they?
Unlike the standard smoothbore musket, rifles had spiral grooves in the barrel that spun the bullet as it was fired, making them slower to load, but much more accurate.
Ooh.
In one legendary incident during Moore's retreat at Cacabelos, rifleman Tom Plunkett picked out and shot dead a French general at 400 yards, some say further. Thanks to the skill of the rearguard and the desperate pace of the retreat, the British kept one step ahead of the French. On New Year's Eve, Napoleon received grave news from Paris. Rumours of plots, and Austria mobilizing once more for war.
How many goddamn times, Austria? How many goddamn times? What is this, the fourth time they go out to war against French? What is the Austrian king thinking? Like, I have lost 3 times already, maybe 4 is the charm? What the hell? And he's never doing things different also, all the time he loses the same way. Make something new up, my friend. Be original.
The Emperor immediately left for France, taking many of his best troops with him, and entrusted Marshal Soult and Second Corps with finishing off the British. The pursuit continued, but on the 11th of January 1809, Moore's ragged army reached Corunna. For Sir John Moore's exhausted army, the Spanish port meant supplies, rest, and the prospect of rescue. But few ships were there to meet them on the 11th. Fortunately, the British had been able to blow up bridges behind them to delay Marshal Soult's advance. And 3 days later, on the 14th of January, the naval transports arrived, allowing Moore to begin embarking his cavalry and artillery. But the very next day, Soult's army appeared on the hills south of Corunna, taking up positions on the heights of Peñasquedo, where he sighted his main battery of cannon. Half of Moore's army deployed in a defensive line 2 miles south of the city, with 2 divisions held back to protect his right flank. Both armies were roughly 16,000 strong. The French had 4 regiments of dragoons, while the British cavalry was already aboard ship. But the broken terrain...
British were already aboard ship and the French had cavalry. Whoa, that's a huge advantage to the French, I would say. Of course, if the British form their famous squares, the French cavalry is doomed.
Of walls, hedges and olive trees made it a battlefield ill-suited to cavalry.
Oh god, okay.
Soult's plan was to attack the British right flank and trap Moore's army against the sea. Around 2 p.m, the French artillery opened fire. Then Mermet's infantry division advanced, supported by La Houssaye's dragoons on his left. Moore had been unsure if Soult would attack, and had just ordered Paget's division to begin embarkation. Now he hurriedly cancelled that order, ordering Paget instead to bring up his men to reinforce his open flank, and Fraser's division to take up position on the heights of Santa Margherita. The French advanced through hedges and over walls, with heavy firing from skirmishers on both sides. Then the British countered.
But what's the difference? They mention skirmishers all the time. What's the difference between the main line and the skirmishers? Like the main French line advances and then there are skirmishers who are skirmishing. There's a different group of men actually, not like the main line who shoot volleys. Skirmishers are... What are they? What's their purpose? What? Teach me in the comments, please.
Attacked. The 42nd Highlanders and 50th Foot charged into the village of Elvina and drove the French out. But in confused fighting, they in turn were soon pushed back to their own lines. Sir John Moore was close to the front line, observing developments, urging on officers and men. But as he ordered up the Guards Brigade to reinforce the line, he was hit in the shoulder by a cannonball.
Cannonball!
He remained conscious, but it was obvious the wound was fatal.
If you hit in the shoulder with a cannonball, it rips off half of your body, I think.
And he was carried back to the city. Soult sent forward Merle's division to support the attack on Elvina. Scottish General Sir John Hope had taken over command of the British army from the dying Moore, and he ordered forward 2 battalions of infantry to meet the French attack. Paget's division, led by skirmishers of the 95th Rifles, arrived to shore up the British right flank. The terrain...
I would be afraid of those rifles, man. 95th Rifles against muskets. They can shoot twice the distance, twice accurate as muskets. I would Oof. To fight against them, you gotta get close, but they can shoot at you. You're a sitting duck to them, far away.
It was so bad for horses that French dragoons chose to dismount and fight on foot.
Oh God!
But were slowly pushed back by the British. Paget's advance threatened the flank of Mermet's attack on Elvina, and he too was forced to withdraw, while an attack on the right by Delaborde's infantry secured a foothold in the village of Piedralonga, but got bogged down in heavy skirmishing. Around 6 p.m, dusk fell, and firing died out across the battlefield. News that the British line had held reached Moore shortly before he died in Corunna, around 8 p.m.
Okay.
That night, the British lit campfires and posted sentries, then silently withdrew to Corunna to begin embarkation. The next morning, the French found the enemy positions abandoned, but they were slow to take advantage. It wasn't until noon that they were able to bring up 6 cannon and get them into position overlooking the Bay of Corunna. The British had almost completed their evacuation by the time the French guns opened fire. In a hurried departure, a few British transports ran aground and 2 were set on fire, but overall, losses were light. A small Spanish garrison held Corunna, waiting until the British fleet had escaped to sea before surrendering.
Brave men! I gotta say, brave men.
Whether Moore's retreat to Corunna was a British disaster or miraculous escape is still debated.
Dunkirk was a miraculous escape, but this one, more like a disaster, I think.
And did he abandon Spain in its hour of need, or draw off Napoleon's main force, buying time for others? Either way, Britain's only army had been saved and would return to fight another day, while Napoleon now faced the prospect of a long war on the Iberian Peninsula and renewed conflict with Austria, a war on 2 fronts that would challenge his empire like never before.
Oh, it's more and more beginning to look like the Third Reich. War on 2 fronts again, and Dunkirk happened, and you can draw parallels to the Second World War all over the place.
Napoleon had blundered in Spain, but it was years before the scale of his mistake was evident. Then he would say, "I embarked pretty badly on this affair, I admit it. The immorality showed too obviously. The injustice was too cynical. The whole of it remains very ugly."
Yeah, I agree. He wasn't really good in Spain handling things.
In 1809, France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, was the most powerful nation in Europe. But the French Emperor's invasion of Spain and Portugal the previous year had failed to deliver the easy victory he'd expected. And with many of Napoleon's best troops and commanders now tied down in Spain, an old enemy prepared to challenge France once more.
Once more for the 3rd or 4th time. How many times do you need?
Austria had been preparing for war with France since her last humiliating defeat at Austerlitz in 1805. Now, with Napoleon busy in Spain and a British promise of cash subsidies, plus a supporting attack in Northern Europe, it looked like the ideal time to strike.
Supporting attack in Northern Europe. British are going to land in Northern Europe. What? That would be very interesting. D-Day number 2, perhaps.
This time, Austria's armies would be led by Archduke Charles, Emperor Francis's younger brother. At 37, he was 2 years younger than Napoleon, but already had 15 years' experience of high command. And he was learning from past defeats. He'd begun to reform the Austrian army along French lines, copying Napoleon's corps system, and introducing new infantry tactics. Napoleon, warned by his spies that Austria was preparing for war, left Spain and raced back to Paris, arriving on the 24th of January 1809. The French army in Germany, commanded by Marshal Berthier, would need urgent reinforcement.
Where do they get the manpower? A lot of men are actually wounded and dead in these armies. Austria has suffered many defeats, lost many tens of thousands, and still they have a whole goddamn army. Where do they get the manpower?
So Napoleon summoned units from Spain, called up young conscripts, and soldiers from his German allies in the Confederation of the Rhine. La Grande Armée was no longer the finely honed instrument of 1805, but with Napoleon at its head, it was still a formidable force. Archduke Charles ordered diversionary attacks in Poland and northern Italy, but launched his main attack against France's ally, Bavaria, on the 10th of April. It came a week earlier than Napoleon had expected and caught the French Emperor by surprise.
You can surprise Napoleon, that's possible. It wasn't possible 10 years before.
Charles was relying on a rapid advance, but a last-minute change of plans, torrential rain, and a slow-moving baggage train slowed progress to a crawl. Marshal Berthier was a brilliant chief of staff to Napoleon, but an indecisive field commander. His forces were too widely dispersed, and Marshal Davout's Third Corps was dangerously isolated at Regensburg. Charles ordered his corps to converge and destroy it. But on the 17th of April, Napoleon arrived at Donauwörth to take over command. He immediately ordered Davout to withdraw from his exposed position. It was too late for him to escape without a fight. Davout's Third Corps was one of the best in the Grande Armée, and in a fast-moving battle across wooded hills, the heroes of Auerstadt threw back the Austrians.
Again!
Despite the heroism of General Major Liechtenstein, badly wounded, leading his troops forward. Third Corps escaped the encirclement. The Battle of
I think that's the second time Third Corps has fought against the entire army. It wasn't Third Corps the unit that fought against the entire Russian army. And here also, fighting against the entire Austrian army. What is Third Corps? How do you do these things? Win a battle or escape like that time and time again. Your luck has to run out at some point, I would say. You cannot base your whole strategy for luck. I think it runs out very soon.
Was the start of Napoleon's so-called four-day campaign. First, he used Marshal Lefebvre's Bavarian 7th Corps and a provisional corps under Marshal Lannes to drive a wedge into the Austrian army. Then he pursued its left wing towards Landshut, believing he was following the main Austrian army.
Again!
French troops and their German allies stormed the town's bridge to win a hard-fought victory. But Napoleon realized that Archduke Charles was not at Landshut, and that, once again, he'd left Marshal Davout to face the main enemy force.
Once again! Davout, if your luck has not run out yet, it will very soon. I mean, how can you keep continuing? How can you continue doing this?
Sending Marshal Bessières in pursuit of the Austrian left wing, Napoleon swung north, falling on the Austrian 4th Corps at Eckmühl.
Oh well, they're surrounded suddenly.
The French and their German allies won their 4th victory in as many days.
4 days, 4 victories. That's kill to death ratio 100%. No, 0 deaths, 100 victories. 100% victories. I never had these odds in Call of Duty, man.
Force was still intact, and hoping to keep it so, he ordered a rapid retreat across the Danube. The French pursued, storming the walled city of Regensburg, which they knew as Ratisbon, with its vital stone bridge. Napoleon put Marshal Lannes in charge of the assault. When the attack faltered, Lannes threatened to lead the next charge in person, and his men, suitably chastised, took the city. During the siege, Napoleon was hit in the foot by a spent bullet.
Napoleon was wounded. Even the god king can bleed. I've seen the 300 Spartans. When I was, I think, 12 or 13, it was one of my favorite movies. Nowadays I watch the movies all studio made, it's not that good. But still, even the god king can bleed. This stray bullet was Leonidas' spear going into Xerxes' face like, you know, this was the stray bullet hitting Napoleon.
But it proved to be a superficial wound.
Superficial wound?
Stubborn Austrian resistance had allowed Archduke Charles and his army to escape across the Danube. Napoleon had cut the Austrian army in half, but both sections now retreated in good order towards Vienna. Napoleon led his forces in pursuit, detaching Lefebvre's Bavarian Corps to deal with a popular revolt in Tyrol, and Third Corps and the Württemberg 8th Corps to guard his line of communications. Charles chose not to defend the capital, which surrendered on the 13th of May after a short bombardment. Instead, Charles and the Austrian army lay in wait across the Danube. Napoleon was now down to 80,000 men, facing 110,000 Austrians.
Oh God!
Charles's army had fought bravely and well throughout the campaign, but Napoleon still had a low opinion of Austrian troops and decided to attack.
To cannon, all men are equal. It sounds like Stalin saying, no man, no problem. Just kill them all. But still, to attack when you have 80,000 and enemy has 110,000, for us it's like, oh, he attacked. It's a huge decision to make. The enemy outnumbers you and you attack. Usually if they outnumber you, you better think about defending and defending good. But he attacks. Only Napoleon.
On the night of the 20th of May, French engineers hastily built a series of floating bridges between the river islands of the Danube, and French troops began to cross. By noon the next day, Napoleon had most of Massena's 4th Corps and his cavalry across the river, about 24,000 men and 40 guns, holding the villages of Aspern and Essling. Napoleon expected the Austrians to retreat once more, and that he'd only face a rear guard. But reports soon arrived that the...
See, here we see Napoleon doing the same tactic the Russians did. Which battle was it? When they were their backs against the river and they lost. Napoleon has his back against the river with his own army right now, and he's facing a superior enemy. Many things can go badly, man.
The entire Austrian army was advancing against him in 5 attack columns, 90,000 men and 300 cannon. The situation got even worse. The Austrians began to float heavy barges and obstacles downriver to smash through the flimsy French bridge. Each time, Napoleon's only supply route was cut off for several hours, causing critical delays to the arrival of reinforcements and ammunition. The battle began around 2:45 p.m. as infantry of the Austrian First Column attacked Aspern. The village was soon under attack from 3 sides. General Molitor's French garrison clung on desperately, fighting hand-to-hand in the streets and suffering 50% casualties.
50%!
To support the defenders of Aspern, Napoleon ordered cavalry to charge the Austrian Third Column. But they could not break through the Austrian infantry, closed up in their battalion mass formation. At 6 p.m, Archduke Charles ordered General Bellegarde's Second Column to take Aspern at any cost.
Oh my god, the garrison is already at 50% casualties. 50% is almost 100% because you need to tend the wounded also. I think they're gonna take it. Is this gonna be the biggest loss we ever see by Napoleon so far?
Himself rode among the front ranks, urging the men forward. In ferocious fighting, the Austrians took the village.
Oh damn.
Napoleon immediately sent in newly arrived reinforcements to recapture it. About the same time, the Austrian 4th Column began its attack on the village of Essling, where Marshal Lannes had taken charge of defences while he waited for his own corps to cross the Danube. The first Austrian assault was repulsed. The veteran French cavalry commander General d'Espagne led his cuirassiers in pursuit, but was hit by grape shot and died of his wounds.
Grape shot! Oh, imagine mass cavalry, horses and men packed together in tight formations attacking and then grape shots. Like many thousand shotguns shooting at once. Moaning down everything. It's minced meat out of horses and men. Grape shots.
Around 9 p.m, the Austrian 5th Column finally arrived in position and made its first attack against Essling, which was thrown back by Lannes' troops. As night fell, firing died out across the battlefield.
But now Napoleon's men
got what rest they could among the dead and the wounded.
The reinforcements are arriving now, I think.
Overnight, 2nd Corps and the Imperial Guard crossed the Danube to reinforce Napoleon's army, which now numbered 71,000 and 150 guns. But then the bridge broke again, leaving Davout's 3rd Corps still waiting to cross.
3rd Corps, man, the most legendary corps, we need you! 3rd Corps has twice defeated or won or escaped a whole army, so we need you now for the whole Austrian army. I'm sorry, I cannot speak, I'm so excited.
Nevertheless, Napoleon decided to attack, using 2nd Corps to break the Austrian centre. But first, Aspern would have to be retaken.
At this position to attack, it's lunacy.
Heavy fighting broke out in the village before dawn. By 7 a.m, it was back in French hands. At Essling, fresh Austrian attacks were fought off by General Lasalle's cavalry and units of the Young Guard. With both flanks secure, Napoleon launched his main attack in the centre with Lannes' 2nd Corps. Austrian guns poured fire into the advancing French ranks.
Grape shot, grape shot, grape shot!
General Saint-Hilaire, leading the attack, a hero of Austerlitz and Jena, had his foot blown off, a wound that proved fatal. Archduke Charles sent his Grenadier Reserve forward to strengthen the line. The French infantry, under torrential fire, began to fall back. At this critical moment, the French bridge over the Danube was broken again, halting the vital flow of reinforcements and ammunition to Napoleon's army. By 2 p.m, the French had been driven out of Aspern once more. Heavy fighting continued in Essling, which was briefly captured by the Austrians, then retaken by the Young Guard. Napoleon knew his army could do no more. At 4 p.m, he ordered his exhausted cavalry to make a last charge to keep the enemy at bay, then gave the order to retreat.
What about your cavalry?
Archduke Charles, whose own army had suffered huge losses and was low on ammunition, was content to watch the French withdraw to the island of Lobau. In the final moments of the battle, Marshal Lannes, one of Napoleon's finest commanders and closest friends, was hit by a cannonball that smashed both his legs. He died of his wounds a week later. It was a deep blow to the Emperor.
He was one of the best marshals.
The two-day Battle of Aspern-Essling was Napoleon's first major defeat, caused by his overconfidence and hasty planning. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and Napoleon avoided a much greater disaster only because of the exhaustion of the Austrian army. the French Emperor had learned new respect for the Austrians. Under Archduke Charles, they had fought bravely, with greater confidence, organisation and leadership. Within days of his defeat, Napoleon had summoned reinforcements to join him on the Danube, and begun planning his revenge.
Revenge!
In May 1809, the Austrians had defeated Napoleon's army in the bloody Battle of Aspern. His enemies took heart. After years of French military dominance, it seemed the tide was turning at last. 3 weeks later, Pope Pius VII excommunicated Napoleon for annexing papal land.
Excommunicated! Oh my god, well this gives you another Spanish uprising, because they will do whatever the Pope does. The Spanish peasantry is all Catholic. Crazy Catholic. So now you have another front in Spain, I think, opening up, and also in Italy, because if the Pope excommunicates you, you gotta invade the Papal States. We have 3 fronts potentially. Horrible.
A propaganda coup for his enemies. But in the wake of its victory, Austria hesitated, not sure whether to seek peace or continue the war, while Napoleon responded with a hurricane of activity. He summoned reinforcements to join him near Vienna, the Army of Italy under his stepson Eugène de Beauharnais, and 11th Corps under Marshal Marmont, who'd together driven Archduke John's Austrian army out of North Italy, as well as Marshal Bernadotte's Saxon 9th Corps. Napoleon's army grew from 90,000 to a massive 164,000 men and 544 guns, to take on Charles's army of 128,000 and 404.
They're now outnumbering, and they were attacking before when they were outnumbered, and now they are outnumbering the enemy. If they attack now, they're gonna crush the Austrians for the 4th time.
14 guns. 6 weeks after his first attempt had ended in defeat, Napoleon ordered his army to cross the river once more. This time his engineers had built solid bridges across the Danube to ensure there was no repeat of the disasters of Aspern. For the French army, Napoleon declared, the Danube no longer exists. The stage was set for the largest battle yet seen in European history.
Oh boy, the largest one, let's go! It's good job you're not any taller. Well, this could be said to Napoleon himself, who was a short man.
On the evening of the 4th of July,
let's go, my friend!
Heavy rain, the
I'm
French
so
began
excited.
crossing from the island of Lobau, not towards the devastated villages of Aspern-Essling, but east towards Groß-Enzersdorf, soon ablaze from French shells.
Were the shells explosive back then? I mean, were they just cannon balls filled with iron, or was there some gunpowder in it? If they fall, they explode and make fire. How did the cannonballs work?
Archduke Charles had left only a small advance guard to delay the French. By dawn, General Massena's 4th Corps and Oudinot's 2nd Corps were driving those troops back, winning space for the French army to deploy. At 1 p.m, Napoleon was ready to begin his advance across 6 miles of flat cornfields towards the main Austrian position, an escarpment known as the Wagram, 100 meters.
6 miles of exposed cornfields. Seems like the Battle of Gettysburg. If I'm not, maybe I'm confusing. Battle of Gettysburg, the General Lee's famous mass march, all exposed, like minced meat happened out of his men. Was it the Battle of Gettysburg? Yeah. Same, you have 6 miles of exposed corn, you can just shoot cannonballs through men. One cannonball can mow down like 5 men in a row if they're behind each other. So this here is not a... Ooh, bad idea.
Behind the Russbach stream. As General Lasalle's light cavalry and Massena's 4th Corps swung left to guard the flank, Oudinot's 2nd Corps and Davout's 3rd Corps advanced towards the Wagram. Bernadotte's Saxon Corps and Eugene's Army of Italy filled the centre. At 6 p.m, unsure of the enemy's strength, Napoleon ordered a full-scale assault against the Wagram plateau. But his troops met determined Austrian resistance along the line. By dusk, the Saxon 9th Corps had pushed into the village of Deutsch Wagram. The Saxon infantry wore white uniforms, like the Austrians, and as darkness fell, were mistaken for the enemy and fired on by friendly units. The Saxons panicked and fled with heavy losses.
What the hell? Friendly fire? That's why I'm talking about the uniforms, man. You cannot do that. You need to think about these things. How do you send your men to fight if they are dressed like the enemy? Even I know it's a bad idea, I'm such a soldier. What were they thinking? Just paint them red or paint them, do something with them.
Napoleon's attempt at a quick breakthrough had failed. That night, both armies slept in the open, while Charles and Napoleon planned their next move.
How can you sleep at that atmosphere? Can't sleep. Day 2, Battle of Wagram.
On the second day, Napoleon planned for Davout's 3rd Corps to lead the attack,
Third
holding
Corps.
up the Austrian flank, while his
The most famous corps. They're gonna rout the entire goddamn army because that's what they do.
other corps pinned down the enemy with local attacks. But to the Emperor's fury, he learned that overnight, without orders, Marshal Bernadotte had withdrawn his battered Saxons from Aderklaa, which the Austrians now occupied. Aderklaa was a crucial strongpoint in the centre of the battlefield. Napoleon gave orders for its immediate recapture, but the French and Saxon attack failed, with heavy losses.
Bernadotte is going to be hanged for this. What the hell are you doing?
The Austrians had their own problems. Archduke Charles, knowing he faced a superior enemy, had decided his only chance of victory lay in an all-out dawn attack. He was relying on his brother, Archduke John, reaching him with 13,000 reinforcements, in time to support the attack on the left. But by dawn, there was still no sign of him. What's more, as 4th Corps began its assault on Grosshofen, on time, 3rd Corps, which had received its orders late, was still getting into position, holding up the entire Austrian right wing.
See, that is luck for the French. It's pure luck.
Charles had
There's
to
no
tell
genius
4th
here.
Corps to abort its unsupported attack until the other corps were ready.
I would be so furious. Imagine you're this corps that attacked enemy, they're isolated, they attack, they put their entire force into it, they fight, and you get a message, oh, cancel the attack, it was the wrong attack, cancel it, we're not in position yet, so sorry, and you have like 2,000 losses already. I would be furious at the high command.
Austrians paralysed by delays. At 10 a.m, Davout began his attack.
Davout!
A fierce infantry battle erupted in the village of
My
Neusiedl, while in the fields, dragoons and hussars fought a giant whirling cavalry battle, as each side tried to outflank the other. Davout's corps took the village.
Of course they
couldn't
did.
stop the Austrians withdrawing to a strong new position on the Wagram escarpment. Meanwhile, a serious threat had developed to Napoleon's left flank and rear. Klenau's 6th Corps had driven back the outnumbered French, with some units advancing as far as Essling, dangerously close to Napoleon's vital river crossings. Napoleon urgently needed to reinforce his left flank, but he was also determined to hold back his reserves for a decisive attack. So he ordered Massena's 4th Corps to march across the battlefield and reinforce the left. A huge redeployment like this, right in front of the enemy, was high risk.
Oh yeah.
So Marshal Bessières was ordered to lead a cavalry attack straight against the enemy centre. Casualties were high. Even Marshal Bessières had his horse killed under him, to the alarm of his men. But the enemy was kept busy, while 4th Corps completed its redeployment and forced Klenau's corps to fall back. Napoleon now...
Well said. I feel like if you're in a cavalry regiment, cavalry corps at that time, you're kind of like a suicide mission. Every time an infantry needs to redeploy or retreat, cavalry is sent to take enemy attention and keep them at bay. And this cavalry might be a suicide mission. It's like a kamikaze mission. Very dangerous to be cavalry.
Assembled a grand battery of more than 80 cannon in the center of the battlefield. This was one of Napoleon's trademark tactics, a concentration of artillery to blast the enemy line and pave the way for a decisive French attack. The Grand Battery fired an estimated 15,000 rounds, setting light to the cornfields. Around 1 p.m, Napoleon ordered a general attack. As Davout continued to batter at the enemy flank, 4th Corps would advance on the left, 2nd Corps on the right, while in the centre, General MacDonald would lead forward 8,000 men of the Army of Italy, formed up in a giant three-sided square to secure his flanks. But despite the terrible French cannonade, Austrian 3rd Corps and Grenadiers of the Reserve met the French advance with torrential fire. MacDonald's giant square was cut to pieces, its men mowed down en masse by cannon fire, and the attack stalled.
What?
But the Austrian army, battered by relentless French attacks, was near breaking point. Every part of the line was under pressure from the French. Archduke Charles, determined above all to keep his army intact, ordered a retreat. The Austrian withdrawal was disciplined and well executed. Napoleon had his victory.
That's not a victory, man.
His army was also so shattered by fatigue and heavy losses, it was unable to launch any effective pursuit.
Yeah. That is well said. It's obvious that you were not at Wagram. Napoleon has learned respect against the Austrians, who have now modernized their military like Napoleon. And I too have learned respect for them now.
The Battle of Wagram was a brutal slugging match, the biggest and bloodiest battle yet seen in European history.
Whoa.
French victory came at unprecedented cost. An estimated 37,500 casualties.
Oh my god! Whew.
Against 41 estuary.
They actually did the D-Day number 2! Oh my god, I'm proud of you, British. This is a very brave step.
Its aim was to destroy French shipping and naval stores. But following the successful bombardment and capture of Vlissingen, British commanders let the initiative slip from their grasp. Their force was bottled up by French troops on the marshy Dutch coast, where it was decimated by fever and dysentery.
Horrible way to go, man.
4,000 died. Many more became permanent invalids.
Oh.
The survivors were evacuated back to England in December.
Horrible. That's Dunkirk number 2.
Emperor Francis, informed of the British debacle and persuaded by his generals that Austria couldn't fight on, made peace with Napoleon.
Again.
In October, Austria signed the Treaty of Schönbrunn, giving up territory to the French Empire, Bavaria, Saxony, the Duchy of Warsaw, and Russia. In total, the Austrian Empire was stripped of 3.5 million subjects, forced to pay an indemnity, limit its army to 150,000 men, and join Napoleon's Continental System, which meant ending all trade with British ships and merchants. Archduke Charles, meanwhile, one of Napoleon's more skilled opponents, had fallen out so bitterly with his brother, Emperor Francis, that he never held active command again.
Oof.
Napoleon had won another crushing victory, but there were worrying signs for the French emperor. His enemies were learning, while he would increasingly...
It's like the Planet of the Apes. I haven't seen it, but I've seen the memes like, oh, the monkeys are learning. It's Napoleon. It feels like the monkeys are learning, man. They are adapting their strategies.
They have to rely on young conscripts to fill the gaps left by veterans killed or wounded on campaign. Few could have guessed in 1809, but Napoleon had just fought his last victorious campaign.
Oh my god, this was good. It was really lengthy also, so respect to you if you watched it till the end. Leave a like, please subscribe to the channel and become a patron if you like these videos. I can make these lengthy videos more for you, my friends. I really enjoy this. Epic History TV might have more very analytical and detailed battle videos. I love them so much. As always, my friends, until my next video, stay cool and bye bye.